I paid my mother's $380,000 in medical bills for 3 years. Then I found out she'd already given my entire inheritance to my sister in secret. 3 years of my savings, my career, and my health, all while she was signing over everything to my sister behind my back. My name is Diane Calloway. I'm 41 years old. 3 years ago, I started paying for my mother's life. Not figuratively, literally. Surgeries, chemotherapy, specialist visits, home nursing care, experimental treatments, medications that cost more per month than most people's mortgages. $380,000 over 3 years. Every cent I had saved since I was 22 years old. I also gave her 14 months of my home, converted my guest room, cooked her meals, drove her to every appointment, slept on my own couch so she could have the bed. I put my career on hold, turned down a promotion I'd worked toward for 6 years, missed conferences, missed opportunities, missed the window to buy a house while prices were still manageable. I gave her everything. And 6 weeks after her oncologist declared her in remission, I found out, by accident, through a misdirected envelope, that she had secretly transferred every significant asset she owned to my younger sister. The family home, a lake property, a brokerage account, $630,000 in total. Signed over to Renee, 18 months before I found out. Right in the middle of the hardest stretch of my mother's treatment, when I was doing absolutely everything. When I confronted my mother, she looked me in the eye and said, "Renee needs it more than you. You've always been fine on your own." I said, "I paid $380,000 for your life." She said, "That was your choice. I never asked you to." That was the moment something broke in me that I don't think will ever fully heal. This is the story of what it costs to love someone unconditionally, and what it feels like when that love is treated like a transaction that only ran one way. My mother's name is Carol. She's 67 years old now. Growing up, we had a good relationship. Not perfect, but good. She was a practical woman. Raised us mostly alone after my father left when I was 11 and my sister Renee was 5. She worked as an office manager for a dental practice for 25 years. She was organized, disciplined, proud of her independence. She owned a modest craftsman home in the southeast part of Portland. Paid it off by the time she was 53. That was her crown jewel, her proof that she'd done it on her own terms. She also inherited a small lake property from her own mother, about 45 minutes outside the city. Nothing fancy, a cabin with a dock and a good view. But it had been in the family for decades, and she loved it deeply. And she had a brokerage account, built slowly over 30 years of careful saving. Index funds mostly. She wasn't flashy about money, but she was diligent. When I was growing up, she told me once, I must have been about 14, that she was building something for us. For me and Renee. Everything I have will be split equally between you two, she said. That's the deal. That's the promise. I carried that promise for over 2 decades, not because I needed it, not because I was counting on it, but because it represented something. It was proof that the sacrifices she made and the sacrifices I made alongside her meant something. That we were a team. That family was reciprocal. My sister Renee is 6 years younger than me. We are very different people. I went to college on academic scholarships, studied business administration, got a job at a mid-sized logistics company right out of school, and worked my way up steadily. By my mid-30s, I was a senior operations manager. Decent salary, good benefits, careful with money. I had about $400,000 saved by the time I turned 39. Not wealthy, but stable. The kind of stability you build deliberately over a long time. Renee took a different path. She went to 2 different colleges, finished neither. She tried several careers: personal trainer, real estate agent, Etsy shop owner, yoga instructor, freelance photographer. Some of these worked for a while. None of them worked for long. She's charming, creative, and genuinely warm. I want to be clear about that. My sister is not a bad person. She loves our mother. She loves me, in her way. But she has never been financially stable. She has always lived close to the edge. And for most of her adult life, our mother quietly supplemented her, lending money that never came back, covering emergency expenses, co-signing a car loan once that Renee eventually defaulted on. I knew about some of this. Not all of it. I never said anything. It wasn't my business. Everyone struggles differently. But the pattern was there. My mother worried about Renee constantly, and she worried about me almost not at all, because she'd decided a long time ago that I would be fine. I was always fine, even when I wasn't. My mother was diagnosed in March, 3 years ago. Stage 3 ovarian cancer. The oncologist's voice was measured, careful, but the word aggressive came up more than once in that first appointment. I was sitting beside her when she got the news. Renee was in Tucson at the time, doing a wellness retreat she'd paid for on a credit card she was already behind on. I held my mother's hand in that pale exam room, and I watched her face do something I had never seen it do before. She looked small, frightened, like the woman who had spent 40 years being the one in charge had suddenly lost the script entirely. "We're going to handle this," I said. And I meant it. The treatment plan was aggressive. Surgery first, a full hysterectomy and debulking procedure to remove as much of the tumor as possible. Then 6 rounds of chemotherapy. Then maintenance therapy. Then monitoring. The costs started immediately. The surgery was at a private hospital. Her oncologist had privileges there, and it had the best outcomes data for this specific procedure. Insurance covered a portion. A portion. The gap was significant. I paid it. Then the chemo started. She tolerated it badly. Severe nausea. Dangerous drops in her white blood cell count. She needed additional medications to manage the side effects, and some of those medications were not fully covered. I paid for those too. After the second round of chemotherapy, her oncologist recommended a consultation with a specialist at a cancer center in Seattle who had experience with a newer, more targeted protocol. The appointment itself, the travel, the follow-up, not covered. I scheduled it. I drove her. I sat in that office and took notes while she was too exhausted to absorb everything they were telling her. I paid for it. By the end of the first year, I had spent just under $120,000. I didn't talk about this openly. It felt wrong to quantify it, somehow, like putting a price tag on loving someone. My mother thanked me constantly in those early months. Tearfully, effusively. She called me her rock. She told her friends about me. She said she didn't know what she would do without me. And Renee, she visited 3 times in that first year. Each visit was a few days long. She brought nice things, flowers, gourmet chocolates, a silk scarf. She sat with Mom and watched movies and made her laugh. Then she went home. She called regularly enough. She texted. She sent cards. But she didn't pay for anything. She didn't coordinate anything. She didn't stay through the hard parts. The first time I noticed something shift was about 8 months into treatment. My mother had a particularly brutal week. Her counts had dropped dangerously, and she needed to be hospitalized for 4 days. I'd been working remotely as much as I could, but this stretched the limits of what I could manage. I called Renee and asked if she could come for a week to help. She said she couldn't. She had a commitment she couldn't get out of. I found out later the commitment was a road trip with friends. I didn't say anything to my mother about that. I handled it. I took emergency personal leave. I sat with my mother through the hospitalization and the recovery. But something registered in me then. Something quiet and slow-moving. The beginning of an understanding I didn't want to have. A few months later, I made the decision to have my mother move in with me. Her house was fine for normal daily life, but she needed more support than anyone could provide remotely. She needed someone there at night when the medication side effects hit hardest. She needed help showering safely. She needed someone who could recognize when something had changed and call the doctor immediately. She needed care. Full-time, present, attentive care. I converted my guest room, bought a proper hospital-style bed with an adjustable frame, put a baby monitor in my room so I'd hear her if she called out at night, organized her medications in a system I could manage at 3 in the morning if needed. She lived with me for 14 months. Those 14 months were the hardest of my life, not because of the logistics, though the logistics were overwhelming, but because of what I watched. I watched my mother fight for her life. I watched her cry in the bathroom when she thought I couldn't hear her. I watched her lose her hair and grieve it quietly, refusing to make a fuss because she thought making a fuss would worry me. I watched her come back, slowly, in pieces, appetite first, then energy, then the particular spark behind her eyes that I had been afraid might not return. I was there for all of it. During those 14 months, Renee visited twice. Once at Christmas, for 4 days. Once in the spring, for a long weekend. Both visits were warm and loving and completely insufficient. But my mother never seemed to notice the disparity. Or if she did, she never named it. In fact, what I remember most from those visits is how my mother came alive when Renee walked through the door. The way her voice lifted. The way she laughed more easily. The way she seemed, somehow, lighter. I told myself it was normal. That Renee's visits were special precisely because they were rare. That I was the constant, and constants don't carry the same charge as the remarkable. I told myself that and mostly believed it. By the middle of year 2, I had spent approximately $240,000. The second year was harder financially than the first. The experimental maintenance therapy her oncologist recommended was largely out of pocket. It was newer, not yet fully covered by her insurance plan, and the cost was substantial, nearly $4,000 a month. But the data on it was compelling. Her oncologist believed it was giving her a meaningfully better chance. I didn't hesitate, not for a moment. I did start to feel the pressure, though. I'd been drawing down my savings steadily. I'd declined the promotion at work because accepting it would have required significantly more travel, and I couldn't travel, not while managing my mother's care. My colleagues were kind about it, mostly, but I watched opportunities move sideways toward people who were available in ways I wasn't. I also stopped dating seriously. There had been someone, a woman named Claire, who I'd been seeing for about 8 months before my mother's diagnosis. Smart, funny, patient. She tried, genuinely, to understand what I was going through. But eventually the reality of my life, the constant medical coordination, the exhaustion, the fact that my emotional bandwidth had been almost entirely redirected, was too much. We ended things on decent terms. I don't blame her. I mention all of this not to catalog my losses, but because these were real costs, real things I gave up, and they weren't calculated or strategic. They came from love and from the belief, the deep, unquestioned belief, that family means something. That what you give to the people you love comes back to you in some form, even if not in equal measure. I believe that. I want to be honest about that. I believed it completely. Year 3 was the year my mother turned the corner. The maintenance therapy was working. Her CA-125 marker, the protein that tracks ovarian cancer activity, had dropped steadily. Her scans were improving. Her oncologist, who had been cautiously optimistic, became more directly optimistic. By the end of year 3, she used the word remission. That word felt like a doorway. My mother moved back to her own home in the spring. She was mobile, functional, still tired, but increasingly herself. She had a cleaning service come twice a week and a neighbor who checked in on her. She was safe. She was recovering. I was 41 years old, and I had approximately $19,000 left in my savings account. I had spent $380,000. I had declined a promotion. I had ended a relationship. I had put a house purchase on hold so long that the market had moved far past what I could now afford. I was starting over, essentially, from nearly zero. But my mother was alive. And I told myself that was everything, that it was enough. 6 weeks after her oncologist declared remission, I drove to my mother's house for a Sunday dinner. It was a good evening. She'd cooked, which felt enormous, the act of cooking a full meal being its own kind of proof that she was back. We ate at the kitchen table and talked about normal things. Her neighbor's new dog, a book she was reading, plans for summer. I was happy, genuinely, deeply happy to sit across from her and see her eating and laughing and being present in the ordinary way. I left around 8 o'clock. I was sorting through the small pile of mail on her entryway table on my way out. I'd been managing some of her correspondence during treatment and sometimes grabbed envelopes to review when I saw it. A letter-sized envelope from a law firm. Portland address. It had been misdirected. It was addressed to my mother, but it had been opened and then, it seemed, accidentally placed in a pile with mail she'd set aside for me to look at. Maybe she'd opened it without reading it closely. Maybe she'd forgotten it was in the pile. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever fully know. I stood in her entryway and I looked at that envelope and something in me, some quiet, animal instinct, already knew this was something I didn't want to read. I read it anyway. It was a cover letter from an estate attorney confirming the completion of amendments to my mother's will and trust. It summarized the key changes. The family home, transferred to Renee Calloway as sole beneficiary. The lake property, transferred to Renee Calloway as sole beneficiary. Brokerage account ending in the listed numbers, transferred to Renee Calloway as sole beneficiary. The cover letter noted that these changes had been finalized and recorded 18 months prior. 18 months. I stood in my mother's entryway, and I read that letter twice. Then a third time. 18 months ago, my mother had been in the middle of her second year of treatment. She had been living in my guest room for 6 of those months at that point. I had been managing her medical appointments, her medications, her nutrition, her insurance claims, her correspondence, her fear. And during that time, she had gone to a lawyer, alone, and signed over everything she owned to my sister. Without telling me. Without asking me. Without any conversation at all. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, put the envelope in my bag. I walked back into the kitchen where my mother was washing dishes. I said, "I'll call you this week." She said, "Drive safe, sweetheart." I drove home. I sat in my car in my own parking lot for a long time. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was something else entirely. Something that didn't have a clean name. I felt the way you feel when you realize that the map you've been using is not a map of the actual territory. When you understand that the story you've been telling yourself about your life, about who you are to the people you love, has been, in some essential way, wrong. I had believed that my mother saw me clearly, that she valued what I had given her, not in a transactional way. I genuinely didn't expect gratitude to have a dollar amount attached to it. But I had believed, in my core, that she knew me, that she understood what 3 years of my life and nearly $400,000 of my security had cost. And I had believed, because she told me, because she said it, that everything she owned would be divided equally between her daughters. She had changed that decision 18 months ago. In secret, while I was paying for her chemotherapy. I called my mother 3 days later. I had spent those 3 days thinking about how to approach the conversation, trying to be fair, trying to consider whether there was an explanation I hadn't thought of, trying not to let the worst assumptions run unchecked. I called her on a Tuesday evening. I asked her about the letter. There was a pause, long enough that I knew she wasn't surprised I'd found it, just that she'd hoped, perhaps, I would find it later, after things had settled more. "I was going to tell you," she said. When? Another pause. "Diane, I need you to understand. This isn't about what you've done. It's about what Renee needs." "Tell me what you mean," I said. My voice was very calm. I was working hard to keep it that way. "You're stable. You have a good career. You know how to manage money. You're going to be fine. You've always been fine." "Mom, I have $19,000 in my savings account. I spent $380,000 on your medical care." "I know, and I'm so grateful for everything you did, Diane. You know that." "Do I?" I said, "because what I'm looking at right now says something different. Renee has struggled her whole life. She doesn't have your discipline. She doesn't have your ability to just figure things out. If I leave things equally, she's going to be in trouble and you're going to be fine. This way, she has a foundation. She has something to build from. And I have nothing. You have your career. You have your abilities. Renee doesn't have those things." "Mom," I stopped, took a breath. "I paid for your surgeries. I paid for your chemotherapy. I managed your medications. You lived in my house for 14 months. I turned down a promotion. I ended a relationship. I spent nearly $400,000 keeping you alive." She was quiet. "That was your choice, Diane. I never asked you to do any of that." There it was. I had braced for something. I had not braced for that exact thing. The precision of it. The way it landed. "You never asked me to," I repeated. "I didn't. I was grateful. But you made those decisions on your own. I can't make my estate decisions based on what you chose to spend. You made your estate decisions 18 months ago, Mom. When I was still paying. When you were still living in my home. When I was still driving you to treatment. You sat across from an attorney and signed those papers, and you never said a word to me." "I didn't want it to affect your care for me," she said. Something about the clinical flatness of that sentence, "I didn't want it to affect your care for me," cut through everything. She had known. She had understood the disparity completely. And she had calculated that telling me would change my behavior. So she hadn't told me. Does Renee know? I asked. She knows what she's inheriting. She doesn't know the full picture of your expenses. So she doesn't know I spent $380,000 while she was signing for a lake house. Diane, this isn't. Does she know, Mom? Yes or no? A pause. She knows I gave her the assets. She doesn't know the breakdown of your medical costs. No. Why not? Because it would make her feel guilty, and Renee. Renee struggles, I said. Right? I know. You're being cruel. I'm being accurate. There was a long silence. I love you, Diane. I hope you know that. What you did for me these past 3 years, I would have been lost without you. But you left me without anything in return. I left you with what you came in with. Your career, your intelligence, your capability. Renee was never able to build what you built. The assets go to who needs them. And the 18 months of not telling me. I made a difficult decision. I handled it the best I could. You handled it by letting me keep paying while you'd already decided. I told you, I didn't want it to affect your care. I finished. I know. I hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after that. Then I called Renee. I want to be clear about what I was hoping for in that conversation. I was hoping she would be horrified. I was hoping she would say she hadn't understood the full picture, that she would never have agreed to it knowing what I'd sacrificed, that she wanted to make it right in some way. I was hoping she would be my sister. She answered on the second ring, warm and bright. Diane, I was just thinking about you. I heard Mom is doing so well. I need to talk to you about the estate, I said. A pause. Oh, she said. Not what estate. Not what do you mean? Just oh. Which told me she knew exactly what I was calling about. Did you know what I spent? I asked. On Mom's treatment. The actual number. She was quiet for a moment. I knew you spent a lot. $380,000, Renee. Another silence. Longer. Diane, that's a lot. I knew it was a lot, but I didn't know the number exactly. Mom signed those estate documents 18 months ago, while I was still paying, while she was still living with me. I know the timing wasn't ideal. The timing wasn't ideal? I heard my voice do something I hadn't expected. It cracked, just slightly, like a fracture line in glass. Renee, I spent everything I saved in 20 years. I sacrificed a career advancement I had worked 6 years toward. I gave her my home for over a year. And while all of that was happening, she was sitting across from an attorney putting everything in your name, without telling me. I hear you, Renee said, carefully. And I'm sorry, Diane. I genuinely am. I know how much you did. I know I wasn't there the way you were. Then you understand how this feels. I do. I think I do. But I also, she stopped. Started again. Mom made her decisions. About her own assets. That's her right. I can't give back something she decided to give me. I'm not asking you to give it back, I said. And I realized as I said it that that was true. I wasn't. What I had wanted was acknowledgement. The kind that goes beyond, I'm sorry. The kind that says, I see you. I see what you gave. I see that it wasn't nothing. That it wasn't just a choice you made in a vacuum, disconnected from everything. I didn't get that. What I got was, Mom made her decisions. That's her right. You're right, I said. She did. And I hung up. After the calls, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I took a full weekend entirely for myself. No medical coordination, no family calls, no planning or managing or tending. I drove to the coast, stayed in a small motel in a town I'd never visited, walked on the beach for hours, ate fish and chips at a picnic table facing the water, sat in the dark in the motel room, and let myself feel everything I'd been too busy to feel. I grieved. Not just the money, not just the assets. I grieved the story I'd been living in, the one where sacrifice meant something, where showing up completely meant that you mattered completely, where a mother who called you her rock, her lifeline, her miracle daughter, would reflect that in her most fundamental decisions. I had believed I was irreplaceable to her. The estate documents said something different. They said, you are capable. You will be fine. She needed you, but she did not owe you. Your capability was both your gift and your disqualification. The more you can handle, the less you need. The less you need, the less you receive. The more you give, the less it is noticed, because giving is simply what you do. And the one who struggled, who needed more, who asked more, who showed up less, she received everything. Because she needed it. I thought about my mother saying, "That was your choice." And I thought about how much truth was in that, wrapped around how much cruelty. It was my choice. Every day for 3 years, it was my choice. But choices made out of love, in the belief that love is mutual, are not the same as choices made in a fully informed vacuum. I chose to give everything because I believed the relationship was what I thought it was. The estate documents told me that at least part of what I thought the relationship was, it wasn't. Not entirely. My mother loved me. I believe that. I don't think she is a calculating or malicious woman. But she had a hierarchy, and she had never been honest with me about where I stood in it. I was the one she could count on, which meant I was the one she didn't worry about, which meant I was the one she didn't protect. Because protecting me felt unnecessary. Because I would be fine. Even now, after everything, I would be fine. And Renee would have a lake house and a family home and $210,000 in a brokerage account. And I would be fine. I drove home from the coast on Sunday evening and made some decisions. The first decision was that I was not going to pretend. For most of my life, I had been very good at absorbing hard things quietly and moving forward. I had told myself this was strength, and in some ways it was. But it had also allowed people, my mother, occasionally my sister, to treat me as infinitely resilient, to behave in ways they would never have behaved towards someone who showed her pain. I was going to stop absorbing quietly. The second decision was that I needed to speak to an attorney. Not to contest the will. My mother was alive, and these were her assets to distribute as she chose. I understood that legally and accepted it. But I wanted to understand my position clearly. I wanted to know what, if anything, I had a right to. I wanted to go into the next phase of my life with accurate information, not assumptions. I met with an estate attorney the following week. She was direct and thorough. She confirmed what I'd suspected. My mother's decisions were entirely within her legal rights. The assets were hers. The transfer was valid. There was no legal mechanism for me to recover the funds I'd spent on medical care, which had been given freely and without a written agreement for repayment. "Is there anything at all?" I asked. "If you'd had a caregiver agreement in writing, a formal document specifying that your caregiving services were to be compensated, you might have a civil claim," she said. "Without that, no? I'm sorry." I thanked her and went home. The third decision was the hardest. I decided to step back from both relationships, my mother's and Renee's, completely and indefinitely. Not out of punishment, not strategically, but because I needed to protect myself. I had spent 3 years running on love and obligation and the deep belief that my family was worth what I was giving. That belief had been corrected, sharply and painfully, and continuing to invest, emotionally, practically, financially, in relationships that had shown me their actual architecture felt like a form of self-harm I wasn't willing to continue. I called my mother. I told her clearly, calmly, "I need a significant amount of time away from you and from Renee. I'm not going to explain this to extended family or manage anyone's perception of it. I just need you to know." She said, "Diane, please, let's talk about this." I said, "I've done a lot of talking. I know what I need right now." She said, "I never meant to hurt you." I said, "I believe that. It doesn't change the outcome." She said, "You're my daughter. I love you." I said, "I know. Goodbye, Mom." I hung up. I called Renee and said essentially the same thing. Renee cried. She said she was sorry. She said she hadn't asked for any of it. I told her I knew, and that it didn't matter right now, and that I needed space. Then I went quiet. I deleted the family group chat. I unfollowed both of them on social media, not blocked, just removed from my daily feed. I reached out to the few relatives who might call me with concerned questions and gave them a brief, honest explanation. I was going through something difficult with my mother and sister and needed time. I wasn't going to elaborate further. What followed was the strangest quiet I had ever experienced. 3 years of constant coordination, medical scheduling, pharmacy calls, insurance disputes, caregiver logistics. All of it simply stopped. The silence was enormous. At first it felt wrong, like a phantom limb. I kept reaching for tasks that no longer existed. But slowly, the silence became something else. It became mine. I started making different decisions with my time, deliberately small ones at first. I took a cooking class on Tuesday evenings, something I'd always wanted to do but hadn't had the bandwidth for in years. I signed up for a weekend hiking group and started showing up to trailheads at 7 in the morning with strangers who became, slowly, something like friends. I started sleeping 8 hours consistently for the first time in 3 years and discovered that my brain worked differently rested, faster, clearer, more creative. I let myself be interested in things again, not things that helped someone else, just things I wanted. There was a photography exhibit at a gallery downtown that I had walked past twice during the caregiving years, always meaning to go in and always having somewhere else to be. I went on a Wednesday afternoon in October, alone, and spent 2 hours moving slowly through the rooms. I didn't take photos of the photos to send anyone. I didn't text to say I was there. I just looked, and the experience of simply looking, without narrating it to someone else or making it useful somehow, felt almost foreign. Then it felt like something I had been missing for a very long time. Small things. I know that sounds like it diminishes them. It doesn't. Small things were what I had stopped letting myself have. Reclaiming them, one Tuesday evening cooking class and one quiet gallery afternoon at a time, was not small at all. I also started therapy. I want to say that clearly because I think people sometimes leave that part out of their stories, as if it didn't happen or didn't matter. It happened, and it mattered enormously. My therapist is a woman in her 50s who has a particular talent for asking the one question that undoes a whole architecture of self-deception you didn't realize you'd built. The first thing she said, after I told her the whole story in our second session, was, "What did you need that you never let yourself ask for?" I sat with that question for a long time. At work, I had a conversation with my director about the promotion I'd declined. She told me the position had been filled, but that something comparable was likely to open up in the next year, and that she'd remembered my work during the years I'd been managing a family health crisis. That conversation gave me more than its content. It reminded me that I had a professional reputation that had survived 3 years of divided attention, that I had built something real there. I wasn't starting from zero. Not really. I was starting from the ground up financially, yes, but not professionally, not personally. And slowly, I started to see that distinction as significant. Because here is what I have learned. The hard way, the expensive way, the only way some lessons come. Capability is not the same as expendability. The fact that I can handle hard things does not mean I should be handed all the hard things. The fact that I will be fine does not mean it costs nothing for me to be fine. The fact that I show up, that I manage, that I don't fall apart visibly, that does not mean I feel nothing. It does not mean I need nothing. It does not mean that what I give disappears into the air without weight or value. My mother made a decision based on a reading of me that was, at best, incomplete. She saw my capability and called it self-sufficiency. She saw my reliability and called it independence. She saw that I would survive without her intervention and concluded that I didn't need it. What she missed was that needing is not the only basis for deserving. I didn't need her lake house. I didn't need the family home. I didn't need the brokerage account the way Renee needs them. As a foundation, she couldn't build on her own. But I had given. I had given enormously, freely, and at profound personal cost. And the gift she gave me in return, the assessment she made, was, "You'll be fine." That's not love. Or it's not only love. It's a version of love that sees certain people as strong enough to absorb anything and chooses, again and again, to let them absorb it. I don't want to be that person anymore. Not for my mother. Not for my sister. Not for anyone. I am allowed to need things. I am allowed to have limits. I am allowed to say, I gave everything I had, and I was not seen for it, and that matters. It has been 14 months since I stepped back from my family. My mother has reached out several times. Cards mostly. A few phone calls I didn't answer and later read as voicemails. She sounds well. Her remission continues, as far as I know. She sounds like herself, practical, carefully worded, occasionally emotional in the particular way she allows herself to be emotional. In one voicemail, she said she was sorry, that she had thought about it more and she understood why I was hurt, that she wished she had made different choices. I played that message 3 times. I didn't call back. Not yet. Renee texted me on my birthday. A simple message, thinking of you. Hope you're doing okay. No pressure to respond. I appreciated the no pressure part. It was uncharacteristically self-aware. I haven't responded, but I've thought about it. My savings account has about $47,000 in it now. A year and a half of aggressive saving. The delayed promotion finally coming through at work. A bigger jump in salary than the original promotion would have been, and a choice to live tightly and intentionally. I am not where I was. I won't be where I was for years. But I am moving. I've been seeing someone. Her name is Patricia. She's a nurse practitioner, which means she has approximately 0 patience for medical drama, but a very high tolerance for complicated family histories. She is steady and warm and funny in a dry, quiet way that I find enormously reassuring. On our 3rd date, I told her the whole story. The medical bills, the estate documents, the phone calls, all of it. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "That's a lot to have carried." "It is," I said. "Are you still carrying it?" I thought about that. "Less," I said. "I'm carrying less of it than I was." She nodded. "That sounds like progress." "It does, I think." "It is." I haven't decided yet what happens with my mother. Whether I'll call back. Whether there's a version of a relationship that works. One where I'm not the person who absorbs everything and expects nothing, and she's not the person who assigns value based on perceived need. I don't know if that version exists. I know I'm not willing to go back to the version that did exist. Some people say blood is thicker than water, meaning family comes before everything. But they leave out what the rest of that saying actually implies. They leave out the cost, the accumulation, the fact that blood, spilled enough, runs out. I gave my mother 3 years and $380,000 and 14 months of my home, and a promotion, and a relationship, and years of sleep, and the particular peace of mind that comes with financial security. I gave her everything I had. And she sat across from an attorney and signed a document that said, "My capable daughter will be fine on her own." Maybe she was right about that. Maybe I am fine on my own. But there's a difference between being fine and being treated fairly. And the confusion of those two things, the assumption that fine is the same as needs nothing, is what cost us everything. I'm 41 years old. I am starting over in ways I never anticipated. And I am also, genuinely, more myself than I have been in years. Not because of what happened, not because pain is a gift or any of the other things people say when they want suffering to have a tidy lesson attached, but because the process of deciding what I would and would not absorb, of saying, "This is not fine, actually, and I'm allowed to say so," that process returned something to me. I had spent so many years being the reliable one, the capable one, the one who handles it, that I had nearly forgotten how to want something for myself. How to say, "This is mine. This matters. I deserve something here too." I'm remembering now. Slowly, imperfectly, with a lot of quiet evenings and coast drives and conversations with a nurse practitioner who listens without interrupting. I'm remembering. And if you have ever been the capable one, the reliable one, the one who shows up completely and gets thanked effusively and then quietly left out of the accounting, I want you to hear this. Your capability is not your punishment. The fact that you can handle something does not obligate you to handle everything. Showing up fully does not mean you deserve less. You are allowed to set down what you've been carrying. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to say, "I gave enough. I gave more than enough. And what I got in return did not match what I gave. And that is not acceptable. And I am not going to keep pretending that it is." I don't know if I'll ever fully reconcile with my mother. I don't know if Renee and I find our way back to something real. I know that I am building something now that belongs to me, that can't be quietly redirected to someone who needs it more, because I am the one defining what I need. That condo I put off buying for 3 years, I've been looking again. The market moved on me. I'll have to save longer than I planned. But I'll get there. I've gotten places before on nothing but discipline and time. The difference now is that I know what it costs. And I know that the next time I give everything I have to someone, I'm going to make absolutely certain they know what they're holding. Have you ever been the capable one in your family? The one who handles everything, pays for everything, shows up every time, only to find out that capability was used as the reason to give you less. Have you ever discovered a secret that reframed years of your life? Have you ever had to choose between staying in a painful relationship and choosing yourself? Share your story in the comments. You might be surprised how many people are carrying the same weight. If you believe that being strong enough to handle things does not mean you deserve to be handed everything, that capability is not a reason to receive less. Hit that like button and subscribe. Because you can love someone completely and still decide that what they gave you in return wasn't enough. And walking away from that isn't bitterness. It's finally, after everything, choosing yourself. Hashtag she paid everything.